Hello everyone, welcome to this tutorial. Today we're going to be learning a bit about Phaser, and it's kind of an introduction to Phaser, some of the basic concepts and how it works. Phaser is a framework for JavaScript that allows you to make 2D animations, games, just a bunch of fun stuff. I really like it, and I want you guys to like it too. So today I'm gonna show you how to make this little animation. Let me close this. That uses a bunch of cool, real, JavaScript concepts, loops, how to iterate through arrays, and how to use timeouts and intervals, and a lot of cool stuff here. So, to do this, you don't need a whole lot of knowledge. Alright, so we're going to start off by making a new folder, and we're just going to call it circles for now, and that's good. So you're going to open your code editor. I use Visual Studio, and now we're in this code editor. We're going to find our folder, so we're going to go to open folder, and we're going to go to the desktop where we made it, and we're going to just select the circles folder. So boom, now we're in the circles folder. We're going to make a couple files here. So we'll go index.html, and we're going to make a style sheet, so style.css, and we're going to make a JavaScript file. We're just going to call it game.js. Easy enough. Alright, so in the index file, we're going to type an exclamation point and hit enter. And if you're in VS Code, it should populate this for you. If not, you can just copy this and type it out. So we'll put our script tag first down here in the body. This is just going to link our JavaScript file to our HTML. So script source game.js. In the head, we're going to link our CSS file. That's right there. And one more thing we need to do is we need to link the Phaser script file. So basically, we're going to go into Google or whatever browser and type Phaser CDN, and you're just going to click this link right here, and we're going to go down, see where it says CDN. We're going to copy this bottom script because this is just the minimized version of the file. It's just a little more efficient. You could use either one of these. It's really not going to matter that much. Our game's not going to be that big. So anyway, so copy this bottom one here, and we're going to just put that right here in the head. So now we have everything set up. We have a link to our Phaser file and our style sheet. So in our style sheet, we are going to just set a few things here. I just like to do this. This will just ensure nothing weird happens with our canvas that gets made. So we're going to set the height to 100 view height, and the width to 100 view width. And we're just going to set a text align to center. That way it just automatically centers the canvas. And that's it for the style sheet. Yep, pretty straightforward. And that's really it for our index file. So okay, here in the JavaScript file, the first thing we're going to do is create an object. This is going to be our configuration object that we can pass to Phaser. So we're going to say type Phaser.auto. This is just going to tell Phaser to run WebGL. If WebGL is not available, it's going to say to run Canvas. It defaults to Canvas. And this is where we're going to set our game field height, which we want it to be the size of the window. So we're going to say window.inner height. Sorry about that. Okay, and width, we're going to set to window.inner width because we want the width to be the width of the window. I'm going to set our background color in here as well, and we're just going to set it to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's just a hexadecimal color. It's like a blue color. I just like it because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think it's funny. And the next thing we need is physics, because we're going to be running some physics in here. So we're going to pass some physics configuration. Physics is an object, so it's going to take in the default physics engine, which is going to be arcade. We're going to use arcade physics for this, and we just need to say we need to pass some config to the arcade object, which honestly we don't have to. I'm just kind of showing you this to show you that you can. You can set the gravity. You can set a lot of things, but this is what I'm just gonna show you here. So our gravity is going to be 0 basically, and you'll see later on you could change this to higher values, and everything in the game field is going to be put under some gravity. And we can also say debug, and we forgot our comma, and we're going to set this to false, and I'll show you what this does a little later. So that should be it. We don't need a comma there, we need a comma there. The last thing we want to put here is our scene reference, and we're actually going to do regular brackets. We're going to be passing in a class. We're going to call the class game scene. So that's it for our config. And then one more thing here, we just need to make a game variable and pass it Phaser.game, and then pass in your config object. So that way, oh sorry, nope, this needs to say new Phaser.game. Very important. Okay, so this is going to set up our game field, and it's going to pass in our config object and use our configurations instead of the default configurations that Phaser comes with. So next thing I like to do is I just add a empty object. I call it G. You can call it whatever you want. I just like to use the letter G because it's short, easy to type, be quick. And you'll see why we do this in just a few minutes. Alright, so now we have all that set up. Cool stuff. So now we can run this in the browser now, because it's going to just show us a screen that's the inner width and height of the window, and it's going to be this blue color that we passed in. So if you're in VS Code and you need to install this live server extension. You don't have to, it just makes life a lot easier. I have live server installed, so we're going to go open with live server, and you're going to see that it doesn't work. Okay, let me see why it doesn't work. Oh, because we passed in game scene. So actually, let's just comment this out. It should work now. Yep, so there we go. We don't have a game scene created yet, so okay, so but you'll notice even though we've set inner height, inner width, it doesn't automatically resize the page. So there is a couple ways to do this, but for our purposes, let me just put these side by side. We're gonna resize the page to a refresh, because if you notice, if I refresh this, it'll, it reloads the page, so it resizes it. So to do this automatically, just to make life easy for us, we're going to add an event listener to the window, and we're going to listen for the resize event, and we're going to just pass in this function for the second argument, and we're going to say window.location.reload. And what this function does is it just tells the window to refresh. So now, if you see it automatically refreshes. And this is going to be important because, if you want your window to refresh if you're using the inner height and inner width. Now there are, whatever you're creating this might not be good for it, but like I said, for our purpose, it'll be just fine. Just an easy little workaround. So we're going to uncomment scene, and since we passed in game scene as a class, it's expecting a class here. We're going to create a class, and we're just going to say class game scene extends Phaser.scene, and we're going to type constructor, and this is a function, and we're going to type super. This is just going to give our game scene a keyword, and just to reference it by. We're just going to give it the same name. You could give it any name you want. I just like to keep it the same, just to avoid some confusion later on. Okay, so Phaser scenes take, in most cases, you'll just be using 3 functions. You'll be using a preload function, a create function, and an update function. Okay? This preload function is just going to help with load times. It's gonna, if you got a bunch of images and a bunch of stuff you need to load in before you create it, you're going to want to do that before the page loads. That way it creates it a lot faster. So that's what this preload is. We would add images and all sorts of stuff here. We're not going to do that for this video. For this video, we're just going to be using the create function. Maybe the update. Depends on how it goes. So for our purposes, we just need this create function. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to add a circle. So we're just going to say g.circle. That way we're referencing this g object. We're pushing in a circle name, and we're giving it a value here of we're just going to say this.add.circle circle, and the first argument is the x coordinate, and what we'll do is say config dot width divided by 2. That's going to center it because we're taking the width divided by 2. That's where we want it on the x-axis. For the y, the next argument is the y coordinate. We're going to say the same thing, but config dot height divided by 2, and those two coordinates should center it on the screen. The next argument, let me word wrap this, and I'm just going to make this a little, let me make this a little smaller if I can. Nope, it's as small as it can go. We'll make this a little smaller. And okay, so we got config width, config height, x, y, and the next argument is the radius of the circle. We're just going to set it to 20. And next is the color of the circle, and we're just going to make it white. This string here means the color white, so we should get a white circle, which we do. Okay, so now we have a just statically drawn circle. We need to add it to the physics engine. To do that, we just say this dot physics dot add dot existing g dot circle. So now we'll be able to apply physics to the circle. So if we call g dot circle dot body, we have to call it on the body, and we'll do set velocity. This is a function you can use to set the velocity of an object. We'll just set it to 200. We should get some movement. So there you go, move right off the screen. To avoid it from moving off the screen, we're going to say g.circle.body. Sorry about that. Let me just turn this off here. Okay. Okay. G.circle.body.set collide world bounds to true. And these next two arguments are going to create bounds. So we want it to collide with the world bounds, true. We want it to bounce off the world bounds at a rate of 1:1 to the velocity. So it's going to bounce, and it's going to set these two arguments are x and y. It's going to set x -200, y -200 when it hits. So let's refresh this, and we should get a bouncing ball here. So every time it bounces, it's reversing the velocity and setting it equal to its velocity on the opposite spectrum. If you were to change this to 2, it would multiply it by 2 every single time. Then your velocity would reach insane speeds very, very quickly, which I can show you here. So there's one bounce, and then you can see things get a bit out of control there. Alright, so 1:1, that way it's always 200, -200, positive x, positive 2, positive y, negative x, negative y. Like, kind of see what's happening there. Alright. Okay, now that we have this, we want to create a lot of circles. So the first thing we want to do is create a variable here. We're just going to call it g.number. It's actually a name pushed to the g object, but for, we'll just call it a variable. G.number equals 10. So we got a number that equals 10. We're going to create a for loop to create a bunch of these circles. So we're going to let I equal 0. and we're going to say if I is less than g dot number I plus plus. So it's going to run this 10 times. Or we could change this number anytime we want, and this will change the amount of times this for loop is going to run. So in this for loop, if you just say console, this is just going to show us what it's doing. So if we inspect this, and go to the console here, you can see hey ran 10 times. If I change this to 20, it's going to run 20 times. So that's how the for loop works. It just runs the same function as many times as you declare this I to be less than. I mean, there's a bunch of ways you can do this. Since I is less than 10, it's going to add to I. It's going to run the function 10 times. Because of that, we can make 10 circles, because we can just say this 10 times. But instead of typing it out 10 times, we can just put it down here, in here, and it ran 10 times. Now, you can't tell, but there's 10 circles. They're stacked on top of each other because they have the same width and height starting points, and they have the same velocities. So to change that, we could pass in something here called math.random and multiply that by config.width. So the x coordinate is going to be a random number between 0 and 1 times the width of the game field. And we can do the same thing for height. So we say math.random times config.height. So now they start off at random spots because it's returning a number between 0 and 1, not 0, not 1. So let's say math.random returned 0.5, and let's say the width of this is 500. Then this number is going to equal 250. Let's say the first run of this for loop, it returned 250. The next run, math.random is going to return, 0.9. You multiply 0.9 times 500, and you get, 400, or whatever it equates out to be. So that means the next circle is going to be placed on the x coordinate at 400 pixels. So you get this kind of random addition of these circles. Okay. And so the next thing we want to do here is make these colors, each color of each circle, random as well. So what we can do to do that is create a function outside of the class here. We're just creating a function just like in JavaScript any other time. And this function is going to be called random color. So to get a random color, we're going to create a variable called, we'll just call it digits, or actually let's just call it D. Let D equal, and we're going to create a string here of all the possibilities of a hexadecimal color, which is 0 through 9 and A through F. A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay? And that's all the possible combinations of numbers and letters of a hexadecimal color. And we're going to say let C equal an empty string, because we're going to add into C here in a minute. we're going to do another for loop for let I equal 0. And now we only want to run this 6 times because hexadecimal colors are 6 digits, 6 characters long. So we're going to run this 6 times. We're going to say I++. And in this for loop, what we want to happen is we want C to plus equal to, you'll see in a second. So we're going to say D math.floor. This is going to round down. Math.random times 16. So basically this is indexed, this is only 15 characters long, but since we're calling math.floor, we need to call it on 16 because it will never hit 16. It will return a number from 0 to 15. Okay, so what's happening here is math.random returns a number from 0 to 1. So let's say it returns 0.5. Well, let's say it returns 0.55. 0.55 times 16. Let's see here. Yep, calculator. 0.55 times 16. So after it does its multiplication, it's going to round down. So this is going to return an 8. So the highest that math.random can go, let's say, is 0.99. You multiply that by 16, it's going to return 15. So you can never get 16. This is 15 characters long. We're calling math.floor, but we're multiplying math.random times 16 first. So math.floor will always round down. It will return a number between 0 and 15. Remember that JavaScript starts indexes at 0. So this would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 indexes. Okay. Now, each time this for loop runs, it's going to run 6 times. It's going to add one of these indexes to the C variable. So what we do is we return C, but we can't just return C because we need to add in this 0x before that hexadecimal creation. So because Phaser wants 0x and then what color you want. So to do that, we're just going to say 0x plus C. So it's going to return 0x and then 6 random indexes. So it's going to say 0x 9c ba ef, whatever. So it's going to return that. So now that we have that, so since this returns this exact string here just in random orders, we can just call random color here. And now all of our circles will always be different colors. It'll call random color every time this for loop runs. It's going to run 10 times. It's going to call random color 10 times, 1 for every circle. Random color is going to return a random string every single time and pass it here. So that's how you get random colors. Pretty cool stuff. Alright. Okay, so the next thing we want to do here is return random velocities as well. That way they're not all starting at 200 bouncing to negative, it's predictable. We want it to be unpredictable. So we're going to create another function, and we'll just call it random velocity. And so to return a random velocity, we're going to need the computer to make a choice. So we're going to say let choice equal math dot random times, well, no, so we need math dot floor math dot random times 1. Yes. Let me make sure I'm doing this right. Let's just see if I'm doing this right. I'm not quite sure. I feel like I am, but so we're just going to call random velocity. We're going to check the console to see what's returning. So it returned a 0. And let's just run this a few times. It should return 0 or 1, but no, it's not, because I'm calling math.floor. So I think if we get rid of math.floor, that's not what we want either. So we want times 2. So, okay, let me just delete this. Math.floor, math.random times 2. So I believe this should return a 1 or a 2. I'm sorry, a 0 or a 1, because we're rounding down. A lot of zeros. Let's see, 0, 1, 0, 1. Okay, good, perfect. So it returns 0 or 1 every time. So we want to make an if statement. If choice equals 1, then we want to return another math equation here, math.random, and we're just going to say 700. This is going to return a number between 0 and 700, and if we just add a little bit to there, we'll just add 100. So it's going to return a number between 100 and 700. That way none of our circles are moving too slow. So if choice equals 1, then do that. Else, meaning if choice equals 0. We want to return the same thing, but negative. So we're just going to say negative math.floor, math.random times 700, and we want minus 100. So now it's going to return a number between negative 100 and negative 700. Okay, so with that set up, we should be able to see this. So let's just console log random velocity. Okay, there we got a positive number. Positive, positive, negative. Boom, perfect, negative. So it's going to return a positive or negative number each time it's run. That's exactly what we want. So because of that, we can just pass random velocity to the set velocity method right here. So if we just say random velocity Now they should kind of, yeah, see how they kind of, but what we want to set it to, okay, so yes, so using just set velocity and passing in random velocity as one argument passes it to the x and y velocities. But actually we want it to run twice, so we're going to say random velocity. We're going to do random velocity twice. That way when it sets the x, it's going to call random velocity. When it sets the y, it's going to call random velocity. So it's going to call it twice. So it kind of creates, rather than once for both, we're going to call it once for each, x and y. So that looks really good. So now we have our circles. They are created at random spots and they have random velocities. So how do we create more circles? And you know, we could always, you know, add circles. But what we want is to add circles at a timed interval. So, or we want it to add circles at certain times. So for that, we're just going to say set timeout. This is a JavaScript function that takes two arguments. The first argument is an anonymous function, and the second argument is the time that you want it to happen in milliseconds. So let's actually raise this so you can see what's happening. If we console.log, hey there. So when I refresh this, after 2 seconds, it's going to say, hey there. See that? I'm going to refresh again. 1, 2. So that's how set timeout works. Pretty cool stuff. So because of that, we could literally put this whole for loop, yep, this guy right here, inside the timeout. Therefore, it creates the circles after 2 seconds. Okay, so you see where this is going. You could just copy this whole thing down, create another one, and change it to 4 seconds. So 2 seconds and then 4 seconds. You're going to get more. And actually, just so you can see this a little better, we're going to change the size of these guys. So we're going to make the first round of them 5 pixels. That's how big the circle is going to be, because this is the radius number. So 2 seconds, you got some little guys, and then 4 seconds, you got the big guys. So we're actually just going to make these 10. And we can up this a little bit here to 20. We're going to make one more timeout. Control C. For 6 seconds. And we're going to make these guys 15. So now, after 6 seconds, you're going to have 60 circles on the screen. And you have the resize event, so if you want it to full screen this, it's going to start over. You're going to have that cool effect here. One more thing I want to show you is there's another method. So I want these colors to change constantly. If you want the colors of the circles to change, we could create pretty sure we create just an array, an empty array here. And then with every for loop, we are going to, yes, g.array.push g.circle. So every time it creates a circle, it's going to push that circle into this array. So if we, let's see if we can console log it. I don't know. Yeah, we should be able to. Console dot log g dot array. So after 4 seconds, we should see, there it is. So the first 20 circles was pushed into our array. So basically, if we do the same thing here, g.array.push g.circle, same thing here, g.array.push g.circle, and actually let's put this out of the timeout method, or out of the for loop, so it only logs it once, g.arr. So now when it finally finishes the circles, it should just log one array, 60. Look at that, beautiful. We have 60 circles in our array right there, like 60. So it starts at 0, so it ends at 59. It's JavaScript. Okay. So now that we have those pushed to our array, we can do something else here. We can say set interval, and this takes a anonymous function as its first argument, and it takes a timer, or in milliseconds, so every 500 milliseconds it's going to run this code. Instead of the timeout, where it just runs the code once after a certain amount of time, this is going to run the code consistently after a certain amount of time. So every 500 milliseconds, it's going to console log, hey, and actually let's get rid of this console log. So you're going to notice every half second, hey is being logged. The interval is running every half second. Okay, so what we want to do with this, we'll get rid of this guy. We're going to run a for loop for let I equal 0. If I is less than g.array.length I plus plus. So we want to run this for loop 60 times, basically. Or wait, I think I might be doing this wrong. No, so it's gonna run it every 500 milliseconds, and it's going to use array.length to run it. So, and actually, it might cause an error because, no, it shouldn't, because g.circle is not going to exist. So, oh no, so g.array I dot fill color equals random color. I think this should be right. So it's going through the array, it's adding I, so it's going to go g.index 0 first. It's going to change the fill color to a random color every 500 milliseconds. And let's see if that actually works. It does. Perfect. So you can see if you look close, all the circles are changing colors every 500 milliseconds. It's because we pushed every circle into the array. Then we loop through the array, and g.array_I means the same thing as 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. Remember, by the end of it we have 60 items in our array. So this is going to return, I is going to equal a number between 0 and 59. Remember, JavaScript, the indexes start at 0. If it started at 1, it would return a number between 1 and 60, but that's not how JavaScript works. So it's going to be a number between 0 and 59. So if I were to just pass 0 here, it wouldn't work, I don't think. Only one circle is going to be changing colors, which is going to be very hard to tell. Anyway, no confusion there. So I, as this is running, I equals the current index that it's on. So it starts at 0 and then eventually ends at 59 after 6 seconds. Because remember, after 2 seconds, the array is only going to be 20 long. After 4 seconds, this array right here is going to be 40 long, 40 indexes long, and so on. So that's it. So you got a bunch of circles, they go in random orders, random velocities, and they change colors every 500 milliseconds to a random color. And you could change the interval if you wanted to change colors faster or slower. You can just change the milliseconds in which it changes. So that's it. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.